In today's video, I'll be showing you how I make some very special mugs for all my kids' teachers. This process starts by using a wire to cut off the mugs from the backs. This specific wire is called a wiggle wire, and as you move it, it leaves really cool patterns in the bottoms of the cups. After that, I pass the bats off to my kids to scrape off, which is their favorite part of this whole process. If you're having fun so far, please hit that like and subscribe button. Next comes pulling handles. You want to start by slapping your clay into a log shape and then get it wet. Start working the clay into a long flat oval by slowly dragging and squeezing your hand down the clay. Eventually you'll get a rope shape, and then lightly pinch your forefinger and thumb a little closer together to flatten your clay just a little bit. This will create a nice shape that's comfortable to hold. Once you have a good thickness, you can run your thumb down the center of the rope to make an even more defined handle shape. Repeat this as many times as you need. I usually cut my handles down to about 6 inches, so I have enough to cut off at the ends depending on the size of the mug. I also always make more handles than I need just in case I drop one, which usually I do at least once every time I am attaching anything to mugs. As you can see here, I made about 13 mugs and I pulled about 17 or so handles, which I cut a few of them too short, so it was good in the long run because I used the ones I needed. As the handles dry, I work on trimming the mugs. Since I made the bottom of these mugs so fun, I don't really want to trim much off of them. This is such a nice change for me because I usually spend a lot of time making the foot of the mug really nice. Trimming is usually my favorite part of the whole process, but it does take a long time. At this stage of the process, it's really fun to see the shape of your mug coming to life. Even when you throw it, you try to get as close to a shape as you want, but trimming really brings out the definition in your mug. At this point, the body of the mug is still very wet. If I were to try to push a handle onto the mug to attach it, it would really distort the shape of the mug, and it would be hard to get it back to the shape that you actually want it to be. So you let it dry. When it comes to cutting letters out of clay, I like to simplify the shape by first making a series of smaller and smaller rectangles. Once the letter inside the rectangle is outlined, I then start to make the curved lines that are the letter. I do this even when I cut letters out of paper. I don't know if it's just the way that my brain processes a more complicated shape by making it into a more basic shape, but this process has always worked for me. This clay is a little bit more wet than I usually like to work with, but since I was making a video, I was too impatient to wait for it to be leather hard. But it's way easier to handle when it's a tiny bit more dry than the clay was in this video. But I did it anyway. As you can see, when I start to peel off this word, it kind of sticks to the plastic. If your clay was a little bit more dry, it would peel off much easier. As you can see, once the shapes are cut out, you can continue to make more detail with the letters. The sticker that you've made out of vinyl really does help make kind of a stencil as you follow along with your X-Acto knife. The more intricate parts of the letters are semi-hard to get out when they are wet because they just smush down. The hardest parts are A's and B's and anything that has an enclosed circle or shape that you can't cut out from the edge. As you can see with the A, sometimes you just have to scoop it out with your X-Acto knife. On to attaching the handles. So once your mugs and your handles feel that they are just about the same dryness, you can start attaching the handles to the mugs. In this video, I use a slip and score method where I scratch up the ends of the handle and then scratch up the spot that you want it to go on the mug. You put a little bit of slip on, which is pretty much glue in the ceramic world, and then you smooth it all together. This creates a really good bind between the two pieces of clay. The liquid water in the clay will get absorbed and sucked into the body of the mug as well as the handle, which is actually what makes them stick together. Then I will continue to smooth the handle into the body of the mug. Sometimes I will even go as far as making a small coil out of a wet piece of clay and putting it around that connection point at the base of the handle of the mug. And then I will smooth that into both the handle and the mug so that there will be no creases when you go to dry your mug. If you don't smooth or add clay, when the piece goes to dry, the handle will pull away from the mug and leave a big crack that you can't fix once it's dried. And then you can try to glaze it, and the glaze will sometimes fill the crack if it's very small, but a lot of times you will be able to see the crack no matter what. After that, I do a little step which is completely unnecessary, but it looks and feels really great. I roll up a little ball of clay and then smooth one side of the ball into the handle that creates a little thumb rest. I choose to smooth it towards the body of the mug because it gives it more leverage when you're actually holding on to the mug. I love it because it just adds a little extra, and it's actually the thing that most customers have commented on so far. As you can see, I don't slip and score these all the time because this ball of clay that I'm using at this point is really wet. If the ball of clay I was using was a little bit more dry, I would add some slip and scratch it up so that it could stick together a little better. But this clay I'm using actually is very soft and it sticks to the handle just fine. And then repeat the process for the next few mugs. It's kind of soothing to watch as my thumb goes into the thumb rest and then smooths out the edges as it gets smushed down. This last step can be kind of time consuming to add the letters, but I've come up with a way to save a little time in the slip and score attachment method. So instead of scoring every single letter, I just apply a layer of slip to the mug and then put the letters directly into the slip. As you can see at this point, I am just laying the letters in the slip, getting them to be as straight as I can see at the moment, but not pushing them down. Then I take a little step back and look and try to line them up as best as I can, and then push it down into the clay. At this point, they should be slipping around a little bit into the slip and be able to smush it down into the mug without putting enough pressure on it to warp the side of the mug. Again, setting it down, stepping back, looking to make sure everything's lined up before it dries enough that it is glued on there forever and you have to cut it off. You can move it around until that point, and then it's a little bit harder to get off. And then I take this purple sponge I have that is very smooth and gently wipe off the slip without wiping away too much of the clay from the mug. If you wipe too hard at this point, you will wipe away some of the mug that you've thrown earlier, and it will show some grog that's inside of the clay and make it sort of bumpy. This is not a huge deal. If you do this, you'll just have to sand it off after it's bisqued. Once you get the majority of the slip off of the outside of your mug, I then go in with a paintbrush and smear it around into any cracks or crevices that might be there and try to remove any excess that might be built up in between the letters that you can't get out with a sponge. Although this seems like it might be time consuming or tedious, it really is important for making your mug look more professional in the end, and I always take my time doing it. And now for the most satisfying part, peeling off the stickers and smoothing out the letters. You can definitely leave the texture that the sticker leaves behind or just smooth it a tiny bit, but I usually smooth it as much as I can. Remember to pay attention to the corners and any parts that seem pokey, because once it's fired, it will be even sharper, especially when you go to glaze them. I just use my finger or my really soft sponge to smooth out the surface as best as I can. And then I go back over again and again to make sure that I don't find any pokey edges and smooth it out as best as I can. Once it's smooth, sometimes I realize that I've smushed down some of the letters and I will go back with an X-Acto knife and make them a little bit more straight. Or in this case, the E on Snyder actually was a little bit more wet than the other letters, and when I attached it, I really pushed it out beyond my sticker and it was a little bit bigger than the rest of the letters. So I used my X-Acto knife to cut it back down to the right shape. As you can tell, I spend a lot of time putting all of these together. I have 7 mugs that I'm making and I'm giving them away for free, and they have taken me days and days to make, but I think that our teachers deserve everything that we can give them for helping us raise our kids. coming to the end of our video. I hope our teachers can just know how much we appreciate all the effort they put into our children, and the patience that they have is something that I think is very important for our children, and I'm very thankful for them.